So at the beginning, in chapter 7, although we have reviewed chapter 7 before, but chapter 7 really we talked about three main parts. Chapter 7 is divided into three main parts. In chapter 7, we talk about wireless network security. Wireless security, what we are trying to achieve here is to authenticate a logical wireless port with the infrastructure. Okay, from a network access layer point of view. Okay, so this chapter. What happened? It was shown, right? It was working now. No idea what's going on. Okay. I said in chapter 7, what we are aiming for is to authenticate a logical port to the infrastructure. Our access requester is any wireless node, and then we need to request authentication with the infrastructure represented by the access point. This chapter first talks about why wireless is special when it comes to security. We talked about the impairment when it comes to the channel, wireless channel. We talked about the mobility. We talked about the diversity of devices themselves. So these are why wireless is really special in network security. So channel impairments, mobility, resource constraints, because the devices are very much resource constraints, and of course accessibility, because as we said, like QR codes, you can read tons of information just by pointing your device, mobile device, to a QR code, and you are reading lots of information which you don't know what this information is going to lead to. Okay. So here we're talking about the diversity of the endpoint. So the device itself ranges from nanorobots all the way to a gaming laptop, wireless, that works on wireless. Similar thing is here, access points. We're talking about very tiny, اللي هو اللي بنسميه USB dongle that can give you access to 5G, all the way to big towers. So this diversity really is very challenging when it comes to how to design network security protocols to fit all these dynamics, all these imprints. We talked about details like this. Here we talked about three major standards, or three major wireless security protocols. قلنا اللي هو الويب, wireless equivalency protocol, and this is very primitive. It talks about using one passphrase. Okay, from this passphrase we generate a common key for all the nodes connected on this DSS. Okay, and it's very primitive, and as I said, and of course the other thing is that for encryption, what protocol do we use, or what mechanism do we use for encryption when it comes to web? RC4, برافو عليك. RC4 is bit oriented طبعا for streaming, and as we said, RC4 itself is inherently weak when it comes to security, صح? So first, so there are two things. One, you're using passphrase to generate a common key for all the nodes. So that's inherently weak. And of course, for encryption, you're using RC4. So that makes web really very easily breakable. Very easily breakable. All you need to do is just to have, for RC4, as you said, we need to have two pair, one plain text to one ciphertext. We can break RC4. We can know exactly the key, and of course it's not as easy as this because you have IVs, initial vectors. But all I need to do is just to read, sniff many initial vectors until I achieve this mission. So this is web. So this the first part, it talks about why wireless is important and so on. In the second part, we talked about some jargons when it comes to wireless standards. What is BSS, basic service set, and extended service set, and we talked about the difference between distribution when it comes to communicating between two access points across the distribution system. The distribution system اللي هو mainly الباك بون, or integration, which is to facilitate the communication between one node here and the internet بقى, beyond the distribution system. We call this integration. Like, for example, to communicate with another Wi-Fi or another مثلا 5G or 4G network and so on. Okay, so in the second part we talked about mainly the actual Wi-Fi jar. Wi-Fi is just a certification alliance, and we have list of 802.11 standards. The most important one that we need to talk about here is 802.11i, which is what we call RSN, or WPA2. Before WPA2 there was WPA1, but WPA1 tried to achieve. So here, so this is the difference between integration and distribution. Okay, and when it comes to mobility, yeah, it's not very important, but this is just for mobility. Whether this mobility is within the same basic service set, in which case there's no transition between access points, or BSS transition is when I move from one BSS to another, or when I move outside the network altogether. These are the roadmap for the standards. So WEP, قلنا WEP uses one passphrase. From it, I create one key that's going to be shared between all the nodes. This is very much breakable. Together with RC4, this is very weak. WPA tried to enhance this by incorporating, as we said, incorporating a MAC address of the node. So instead of having one passphrase from it, I generate one key for the entire network. No, now I have to have separate master key or separate key with each node. And in order for me to do that, I combine the passphrase with the MAC address of each node. Okay, together with some مثلا ممكن IP address to generate one separate key with each node. Okay, but the authentication, no authentication is needed. I don't need to do authentication. All you need to do to authenticate your machine is to enter the passphrase. That's it. We don't have to go to a server and do handshaking. We don't have to do this. Neither in WEP nor in WPA. So the only difference WPA tried to address is, instead of using one shared key, we have to use separate key with each node. That's it. By incorporating the MAC address. Of course, the security is strengthened, of course, because now you need to identify each key for each node separately. Okay, but it's not, again, it uses RC4 برضو, but it's not enough for us. So here for RSN اللي هو 802.11i, we try to use a complete secure system where we have to first perform authentication. Okay, in fact, before that we do discovery, as we will see. We have to do authentication, and then we have to do key exchange using one of the methods. And actually the method for authentication and key exchange can be done in different ways. By doing this, what we establish is a pre-master key, okay, based on authentication. And then after that, from this pre-master key, we have to generate a fixed length master key. And then from this master key, we have to generate a bunch of other keys, right? You need to know, but these keys are very important. You need to know the function of each key and what it's used for. We'll talk about it. In terms of the standards, 802.11i try to be backward compatible, in which case it uses two different set of mechanisms. One is TKIP. TKIP is backward compatible. TKIP, in fact, uses RC4. Okay, so TKIP here uses RC4. ماشي? Similar to, عشان هي to be backward compatible with WEP and WPA, right? In addition to that, we have بقى اللي هو CCMP. CCMP, I will see stands for اللي هو counter mode, right? Mechanisms. For counter mode, we use by AES, because AES is very strong when it comes to security. Okay, but in order to give AES the flavor of supporting stream, we use a counter mode. So AES with counter mode, right? Together will achieve the same objective like IRC4, but with more security strength. Okay. And for message integrity, okay, we use بقى ايه اللي هو بنسميه السايفر بلوك تشيننج AES, because here we don't need بقى الايه سايفر بلوك تشيننج, we calculate اللي هم الماك المسج authentication codes. Okay, in that case we don't need the stream features. We can generate these message authentication codes without having to, because this is not the data, it's just to generate the signature. Okay. And then for key generation اللي هي بقى الايه اللي هي الهاشing functions, for key generation we use some mechanisms اللي هم ال HMAC and so on. We don't have to know the details of these stuff. What we need to know really is the what are the types of keys and what each key is used for. This is important. ماشي كده؟ So these phases are very important. These phases, لو phase 1 we do discovery. By discovery we mean that the node needs to discover which access points in the range so that we start the authentication process with this particular access point. Okay, so this is phase 1. Phase 2, as we said, اللي هو ايه؟ authentication. Authentication we use 802.11i uses EAP اللي هو Extensible Authentication Protocol فاكرين as a unified interface, right? And 802.1x. Okay, these two from chapter 5 فاكرين اللي هو Network Access Protocol. RSN uses those two, okay, to facilitate the authentication process. ماشي؟ We use اللي هو Extensible Authentication Protocol and 802.1x. This is as part of the authentication phase. The end result of the authentication phase is just to achieve one master key for each node separately. Okay, this master key we use it to generate a bunch of other keys. Okay, this master key itself is not used for any communication, and that's why after the authentication, the logical port, it's still not open for any data transfer ولا حتى information ولا حتى control information. ماشي؟ فالauthentication is not enough. Okay? نيجي بقى للايه؟ For the key management, then from the master key, we need to generate a bunch of keys. Some keys are used to exchange control messages. Okay, and as we said, the control messages are used to generate the transient keys for particular nodes separately, and the group communication keys that have to be shared for multicast and broadcast. Okay. And this is what's coming. Yani all of this is done as part of the key management. And then after the key management is done, معناها each node will have keys to exchange control messages, keys for protecting the actual data, like encryption and integrity of the actual data, right? And also the group communication key if this node is part of any multicast group. Okay? So here we can start to exchange some data. So the fourth phase here is protected data transfer. So each node can now, only now. So here, for all these three phases, the port is closed. It's not open for any data exchange. Okay? Only here, after this key management phase, the port will start to be open for unicast at minimum, and for multicast as well if the node is part of a multicast group. Phase 4 is when we do the protected data transfer. We have all the keys established, so we can start to exchange actual data. ماشي? The details are here. So this is the first authentication phase, and the authentication phase is very long. You don't, as I said before, you don't need to memorize all these messages and the details. You don't need to do that. No need to do this. The phases are enough to know and be able to identify and describe these phases is more than enough. Yes, yes, true. Yes, yes, yes. So this is only the authentication phase. The end result of this, as we said here, control port blocked. Yani until we finish all of this, because this is the authentication phase. We didn't even do the key exchange yet. Our key management phase. It's not started yet. ماشي كده? So after we do what is the difference between control port and uncontrolled port? Having control port is the one that needs to be authenticated before we do the data exchange. But the control port could be blocked or open. Okay? Uncontrolled port is, as we said, we use it مثلا to communicate with the back-end servers. This port does not have to be controlled. We don't need to establish any authentication. ماشي? Yeah, these are very important. But these keys are very important. We have the master session key. Master session key, as we said, this is based on the authentication method, and that could be of different size, right? But to use it for data transfer, it needs to be of fixed size. صح كده? So that's why master session key, it needs to be used together with a hashing function to generate a pairwise master key, which is that of fixed size. So this master session key is agnostic to the method of authentication that we are using. But the pairwise master key is unified. The pairwise master key is agnostic to the authentication. This one is dependent on the authentication. Sorry. Pre-share key, as we said, for one particular method of authentication, اللي هي مثلا based على ال IKE مثلا, or based على authentication using pre-shared key. This assumes that we have to use pre-shared key to do the authentication also. لا, هو انت ال pre-shared key is used to authenticate the node with a server, assuming that the server needs pre-shared key. يعني مثلا زي مثلا اللي هي بنسميها ايه؟ الكيربروس مثلا. It uses some kind of pre-shared key مثلا. Okay? So we use the pre-shared key to do the authentication first. After we do the authentication, now we have a master session key. So pre-shared key is only used if the authentication requires pre-shared key for authentication. ماشي؟ إنما all the other methods, they use مثلا certificates or they use some credentials ولا حاجه زي كده to perform an authentication. Okay? Regardless of the method of authentication that we use, the result of this is a master session key which is dependent on this method. Some method of authentication مثلا generates a key of 40 bytes, some generates 60 bytes, some generates 70 bytes. But the pairwise master key on the other side is a fixed 48 byte master key, fixed size. So from all these keys, we have to use a hash function to generate the pairwise master key. You see there? Pairwise master key on its own does not mean anything. I cannot use it for data trans. I cannot use it for data integrity. I cannot use it for anything. But I use it as one ingredient to generate all the other keys. ماشي؟ ايه بقى هي الاذر keys اللي هي بنسميها pairwise transient keys. دي بقى are group of keys which are listed here. These keys are divided into 3 categories. One is called key confirmation key, one is called key encryption key, and one is called temporal key. قلنا these two are used for the security of the control message. لا ما لسه ما جالناش اصلا. These two are used to secure the control messages only, not the data, not the actual data. Okay? This temporal key is for securing the data. And this one is divided into keys that are used for unicast and keys that are used for group communication or multicast. ماشي؟ طيب ازاي بقى احنا from the master session key we generate all of these. Okay, we generate اللي هو key confirmation key and the key encryption key. Key confirmation key is used for the integrity of the control messages. Okay, and key encryption key from the name is used for the encryption of the control messages. Control, not data. Okay, طيب. And then the key بقى اللي هو temporal key is includes بقى ايه؟ temporal keys for unicast and also the اللي هي الجروب temporal key for multicast. For group temporal key for multicast, we need another important ingredient which is group master key. طب ما احنا عندنا الماستر سيشن key. Why do we need the group master key? From it we generate the group temporal key. Why? ان احنا قلنا group master key now is shared for all the nodes that are part of this multicast group. صح؟ This is different from the master session key because the master session key is for each node separate. Okay? بينما احنا هنا بنتكلم على multicast. Multicast معناها ايه؟ I'm sending the same message to multiple nodes. So there needs to be some shared key. Okay? معايا ولا مش معايا؟ واضح. Okay? So we need a shared key. ماشي؟ يبقى الشير كي ده اللي هو الجروب ماستر كي is a shared key for the group type. Why do we need group transient key? الجروب ماستر key by the way is generated as hashed between multiple يعني ماك بقى addresses وشويه حاجات كده. المهم ان انا بجنريت one group master key for this group. طيب why do I need group master key and group temporal key? لان group temporal key it needs to be renewed every time a node goes out or comes into the group. Okay? يبقى إذا الجروب ماستر key can be fixed for a long period of time. Okay? And master session key can be fixed for a long period of time. Okay? Temporal key is used for unicast, and here group temporal key it needs to be changed every time a node goes out or comes in. عرفنا ايه الفرق بين الجروب ماستر كي والجروب temporal key؟ Group master key is established for one group and it can be fixed for a long period of time. Group temporal key, it needs to be changed every time a node goes out or a node comes into the group. واضح كده؟ All of this add to it group temporal key. يبقى انا كده عندي all the keys that are used for data protection بقى. Okay? The other two here are used for protecting not the data, the control information. Okay? So this is the sequence. So here you will find that as part of here بقى, these messages use the group confirmation key and the group encryption key to encrypt these messages. And these messages are not data messages. These are still control messages. واضح؟ These are still a control messages. مش كده؟ فهمنا ايه الفرق؟ Okay. And here, after I step now, here as you can see, the control port is open, but only for unicast. Yani the only thing I was able to establish from all of this is the temporal key, which can be used for unicast. ماشي؟ But if this node needs to communicate in a multicast or broadcast fashion, then that's not enough. I need to have the group transient key, the group temporal key. And the group temporal key here, the group temporal key is hashed from the group master key together with a bunch of other things. ماشي؟ ده after خلاص يعني after I finished and now all of this is part of the key management, which is the third phase. All of this for unicast and for multicast, كل ده part of the key management phase. قلنا أول phase discovery phase، ثاني phase authentication phase، ثالث phase key management. key management ينقسم إلى unicast ومulticast and broadcast. All these keys are generated as part of the third phase. Fourth phase خلاص أنا all the keys are there. I just do the protected data transfer اللي هي actual data transfer. خلاص بقى keys are there. واضح كده؟ ماشي كده؟ تمام. ف this is the interaction between اللي هو زي ما قلنا اللي هو this is the interaction between اللي هو TCAP and CCMP as part of that 8.11i. ماشي؟ Any questions so far؟ ماشي؟ بس this is the pseudo random function which is used to generate لأن قلنا keys master session key from it I need to use pseudo random function to generate all the bunch of other keys. تمام. خلاص كده؟ فده ايه؟ ده chapter 7. هنيجي بعد كده لشابتر 9. chapter 9 بقى we talk about ايه؟ IPsec. احنا بقى ايه طالعين فوق في الايه؟ we are going up in the stack. sorry down in the stack. down sorry. لا up احنا غطينا الوايرلس نتورك سكيورتي اللي هو from data link layer point of view which is to secure the port, physical port. Here we go up in the stack to go to IPsec. IPsec is used to secure ايه؟ ايوه بين ايه وايه؟ ايوه برافو عليك. يبقى between two hosts or two private networks. host to host قلنا ممكن نستخدم اللي هي الترانسبورت مود. اوكي؟ غير كده host to network to network نستخدم الايه؟ التانل مود. صح؟ For tunnel mode we can encrypt even the IP header. Okay? The inner اللي هو الاوريجينال IP header and then we have to add an outer header which is the one that will be used to route the message to the firewall on the other side. ماشي؟ طيب. So this is IPsec. طبعا اتكلمنا على الستاندرد كتير اللي هي IPsec standard و this is the difference between for host to network we use tunnel mode. For network to network we also use the tunnel mode. So for network to network, for us this network is a private network and the traffic inside the private network could be يعني ايه not protected. احنا مالناش دعوه، احنا بس we are protecting the traffic here to go through the internet and this is used for اللي هي بنسميها ال private WANs. اوكي؟ او اللي احنا كنا سميناها في نتورك 1 كنا سميناها intranet. ماشي؟ ف we need to secure the traffic going from two remote networks through public internet. In that case we use IPsec to secure the traffic in between اللي هو going through the internet. طيب ماشي اتكلمنا على الستاند. طبعا احنا قلنا what is the motivation behind IPsec؟ ليه ما نستخدمش مثلا TLS ولا SSH is used to secure the application to application, right? But a host may run tons of applications. صح؟ One host may run 100 applications. So just the fact that you are securing one application, it doesn't mean that the other applications will be secured. So if you have one application on the host that's not secure, this application can be compromised, in which case it can send some network injection messages to the network. It can attack the network itself. Okay? Network injection اللي هي بنسميها routing message ده. يعني ممكن تبعت route update, route advertisement messages to the network, right? As if it's coming from a legitimate source, and it can cause some corruption to the routing information. So IPsec is particularly used to secure طبعا the data traffic as well as all the route advertisement all things related to NAT messages, يعني everything related to ICMP messages, all the routing related messages or routing layer messages. This is the portfolio of the documents. We don't have to really. طبعا احنا اتكلمنا, we talked about two major standards اللي هي ESP وال AH. طبعا احنا زي ما قلنا in the new versions of IPsec, now ESP can be used for both encryption and authentication, which means that the use of AH has been deprecated, or it becomes a optional. Okay, so you don't need to have a header for AH altogether. So the header of AH is optional. Okay, but ASP header is mandatory. This is the difference between transport mode and the tunnel mode. وإحنا عارفين الفرق طبعا. So that's yeah. So this architecture is important. So as we said, we have the security policy database. Everything starts with the security policy database. Any incoming, you're supposed to have some traffic coming to the firewall or to the router or to the host that runs IPsec. Okay. When any traffic comes in, the first thing you should do is to check whether there is a rule in the security policy database or not. Okay. هتقول لي طب ما يعني ممكن some traffic may not be secured or may not be مثلا part of the VPN. Yes, but even this traffic has to go through IPsec, and IPsec needs to take a decision to bypass this traffic away from the VPN tunnel. We'll see some examples. Okay, but everything has to pass through security policy database, and that's why if a traffic comes in, a packet belongs to a traffic, this packet comes in. If you see no rule in the security policy database, what would you do? Discard على طول. Discard, مش أي حل. هتقول لي ما this might be part of a valid traffic. No, even a traffic that needs to be bypassed, it needs to go through the security policy database. You need to have a rule, and the rule have a decision of bypass. هنشوف دلوقتي. Everything has to go through the security policy database. And there is the security association database. That's different. If you have a packet that has a rule, and it goes after you have the packet has a rule, معناها ايه؟ ان انت you say that this packet is bypassed. خلاص لو bypass, it doesn't go through خلاص security association database. If the packet is supposed to be part of the VPN tunnel, then the packet needs to have اللي هو بنسميه SPI, اللي هو identifier for the security association. This is very important. Okay, if the packet does not have a security association in the security association database, then what would you do? In the security association database, then what do you do? Yes, you do not discard in that case. Then you have to first establish a complete security context and a new security association by contacting BAL IKE. You need to do authentication, exchange, and all of this. Okay. If there is a security association database, a security association entry, okay, then from the security association entry, you get all the information for the AH, for the ASP, for everything. Okay. وهنشوف details. ماشي. So this is the architecture. طيب. A security association was identified by what we call a security parameter index. This is like the key, the primary key that identifies the security association in the security association database. Okay, so if the SPI does not exist in the security association database, you don't discard the packet, but this means that you need to establish a new security association by going through IKE. You need to establish that authentication, تاني وكي exchange وكل الكلام ده. Okay. طيب. These are the fields inside the security association database. Do you need to know all of this? Well, yes and no. يعني you have to be smart. This is the type of list that where مثلا I can give you مثلا multiple choice question and tell you which of these does not belong to the security association. ماشي؟ يعني اجيب لك حاجات زي كده، مثلا اقول لك مثلا ايه ماستر سيشن كي. It does not exist here. So you need to be able to know that this does not belong to the security. ماشي كده؟ انما other than this احنا اتكلمنا عن تقريبا every single field of these، واتكلمنا حتى عن anti replay window, which is anti replay for IPsec is also very important. We talked about it. We have a question about it in the exam for midterm. It's still very important because I think there is still some confusion. طبعا AH and ESP information is there, and also the path MTU. وقلنا the path MTU why is being used. This is the security policy database where I need to know the rules, and these are the fields that can be included in this rule. So I say that the packet that has this local IP address, it needs to go through this security association. The packet that has this remote IP address needs to go through, and so on. So I can specify the rule as a combination of all these fields. Right. Yeah. So this is example back. So a packet coming from the upper layer with a protocol UDP with this local IP address, see here, bypass. Bypass معناها ايه? Do not send it through the VPN tunnel. Okay? So this traffic, it does not have to be secure. It doesn't need to be secure. Okay? But that doesn't mean that it should not exist in the security policy database. Every single traffic has to have a rule in the security policy database. واضح كده؟ If it does not have a rule in the security policy database, then I discard it. ماشي؟ طيب. This is the flow chart. This is the flow chart. And as you can see, the first step here is to search security policy database for every single traffic, حتى لو it doesn't have to be secure. Okay? And now if there is no match, I don't need to do any discard على طول. But here, if then determine the policy. If it's to be protected, then I have to go to the security association. If it's not to be protected, I don't have to do anything. Bypass it على طول. If it needs to be protected, then I search the security association database. And now, if there is no match, then I go to IKE back to establish a new security association. I don't discard it. Here, there's no discard anymore. واضح? But if there is a match, معناها security association exists, so خلاص معناها everything is established, the security context is established, I have all the required keys and everything, so I can start protecting. This is there. When it goes back to the remote firewall or to the remote router. Okay. This is the anti-replay attack. The mechanism is very easy. So you have a start and an end of the window. Okay. If a packet comes before the window, then discard. خلاص, I don't have to check anything. Discard. خلاص. ماشي. If a packet comes inside the window, okay. So now I need to do two things. First, I need to make sure that the message is the integrity of the message is correct. معناها authenticate the message. معناها ايه? Check the message authentication code. Okay, because if the message cannot be authenticated, there's no point. The message cannot be authenticated, so throw it away. If the message is authenticated, معناها the message authentication code is verified, then I need to check the sequence number. If the sequence number is in a place which is already received, then خلاص I discarded برضه. Okay. هتقول لي طيب do you have to send any alert? No. Why? لأن احنا قلنا ال IP نفسه is unreliable. Okay. But there could be some possibility that this message is retransmitted and stuff like that. So we don't send alert just yet. تمام؟ If it's coming to a place that's empty, معناها it's not received, then we accept the message and we send up with it. Type. If the message is coming after the window, then we slide the window. If the message is authenticated, again, first I have to authenticate the message, accept the message, and slide the window. اوكي واضح كده؟ طيب so this is the actual key attack. other than this I think يعني everything else is ايه is طبعا اتكلمنا عن السكيورتي باندل والكلام ده. السكيورتي باندل we can bundle more than one security association, one for ASP, one for AH, we combine them all together and so on. دي صار يعني ايه details مفيش مشكله. طبعا اتكلمنا على الاي كي اي. الاي كي اي has two parts اللي هو الواحد اللي هو بنسميه الاوكلي كي ديستريبيوشن بروتوكول والانترنت سكيورتي اسيستم. one works as بروتوكول بس اللي هو بيتكلم على الفورمات، واحد بيتكلم على الميكانيزم فور اوثنتيكيشن. طبعا هنا بنتكلم على what are the feature for the mechanism. وقلنا ان في حاجه اسمها كوكيز بنستخدمها for clogging attacks اللي هي ال denial of service attacks. وقلنا ديفي هيلمان is used for key exchange ونانسز are used for replay attacks. okay and ديفي هيلمان is for public key values and so on. يعني دي مش مشكله قوي. طبعا this is the complete messages. again all these messages don't have to memorize, don't have to memorize in details. يعني ده خلاص الثانيه. طيب اتكلمنا طبعا عن chapter 6. in chapter 6 we talked about transport layer security. Transport layer security, as we said, is used to secure application to application. Okay, one application to one application input. That's it. The host itself is not secure. It's one application input. We talked about two different standards. الستاندرد اللي هي اول واحده اللي هي اسمها ايه؟ Transport layer security اللي هي TLS. And TLS is actually the evolution of SSL. Okay, is used to secure web client to web server traffic. Web client to web server traffic. ماشي كده؟ اللي هو for SSL and TLS. And when we say they secure application to application معناها everything above TCP is secure. TCP header itself is not encrypted. خد بالك. Okay, TCP header itself is not to be encrypted. This is the TLS, which is يعني extension of. This is the protocol. All the four protocols that are used as part of TLS. قلنا في record protocol اللي هو above TCP اللي هو for securing اللي هو الكونكشن نفسها. The data that's coming from one web client to one web server. Okay. But in order for us to secure one connection, we need to establish some security context. What are the algorithms that are going to be used for مثلا for encryption, for integrity, for all of this, for طبعا اللي هو pseudo random generation and so on. Okay, and this is done as part of the handshake protocol. So the handshake protocol is the one that establishes the authentication of the client to the server and from server to client, right? To again achieve اللي احنا بنسميه برضه الماستر كي. Okay. And then the cipher spec. The cipher spec is the one that contains what are the algorithms that are going to be used for encryption, for integrity, and so on. Alert protocol is to send alert messages in case you find any مثلا possibility for breaching the connectivity. واتكلمنا على some examples at the end of this chapter. We'll get to it. Heartbeat protocol is important. لأن heartbeat protocol many people they don't really يعني حتى هنا عندنا يعني some people they don't pay attention to the heartbeat protocol. This is used for two things. First, to make sure that the other party is alive. All the heartbeat protocols are used for this. But the heartbeat protocol as part of TLS has another functionality which is very important, as we said. Send signals to make sure that the firewall does not prematurely invalidate this connection. This is very important because sometimes you can browse مثلا website معين and then you have just by browsing the website you have security context established. صح? All the keys and everything is there. And then you stay idle مثلا. You are trying to fill a form مثلا. ف nothing is going back and forth. You are trying to fill a form, صح؟ ف by filling the form, you are not actually exchanging any messages. Okay? And then you spend مثلا 5 seconds. During these 5 seconds, maybe the firewall will block this connection خلاص. Will say that خلاص, this connection is not valid anymore. Okay? So even though you are staying idle, you are not interacting with the server, but the heartbeat protocol in the back end, it sends regular messages to the web server so that the firewall will keep this connection context valid. Okay? So one is to keep the other party, to make sure that the other party is alive, and two is to make sure that this connection context is still validated by the firewall. ماشي كده؟ اتكلمنا على فرق بين التي ال اس كونكشن والتي ال اس سيشن، قلنا ده بالظبط it aligns with ال FTP as a session level protocol، صح؟ which the functionality of which is to accumulate the conversation between the client and the server. Okay? And the TLS connection is the TCP connection. And one session may contain multiple connections. And in fact, this is the main difference between TLS and SSH. On TLS establishes one session and multiple connections. Okay? So when you interact with the web server through TLS, the fact of the matter is that you generate many connections. Not only one connection. You may generate multiple connections. Each of these connections may be assigned a cipherspec to secure that connection. Okay? And then after some time, you establish another connection with another cipherspec and so on. So you keep generating many connections. SSH on the other side tends to use one connection, okay, for the entire communication. هتقول لي طب ما هو في services on top of this. For services it uses ايه بقى؟ the concept of ايه؟ هتفكر؟ SSH uses the concept of channels. برافو عليك. And the concept of channel is application level. It's not transport level anymore. But here we need to establish a transport layer connection for every single conversation with the web server. And this is the main difference between TLS and SSH. تمام كده؟ Again, this is the session state. There's a session state and connection state. This is a perfect example for مثلا ايه multiple choice connection. So I give you مثلا ممكن اجيب لك list من الحاجات دي واحط لك حاجه من الكونكشن ستيت واقول لك which one is not, it does not belong to the session state. واضح؟ You need to be able to identify that this belongs to the session state, this belongs to the connection state. So what belongs to the connection state does not belong to the session state. The other way around. واضح اهو؟ طيب ماشي كده؟ Session state is identified by the session identifier in addition to the peer certificates, compression method, and so on. Whereas the connection state is the one that contains all the keys required. When all the keys are 3 from the client to the server and 3 from the server to the client. So whenever I say server write key معناها ايه؟ From the server to the client. Client write key معناها from the client to the server. ماشي كده؟ For each one, I need one encryption, one for MAC أو integrity, one for اللي هو initial vector. ماشي كده؟ طيب for this is okay. قلنا طبعا ال compression for all protocols يعني TLS أو SSH they use compression but it's optional. صح؟ It's as part of the standard it's optional. If it's done then you need to identify the compressed length. طيب. TLS, that's it. Again, these are the detailed messages. We don't have to memorize it. Yeah, this is the heartbeat. And these are the two functionalities of this heartbeat, two purposes. It assures that the other party is alive, and then it makes sure that it generates activity in the back end so that the firewall does not prematurely invalidate the session. That's it. طيب SSH قلنا the main difference SSH بقى هنا unlike TLS it uses transport layer protocol هو مقابل للريكورد protocol on the TLS, right? اللي هو from that transport layer level. At the session level we have two things. We have اللي هو ال SSH authentication protocol اللي هو user authentication, and this is mainly done using credentials. ال SSH عشان بيستخدم for remote login وكده, mainly using credentials. وال SSH connection protocol as part of this بقى we generate اللي هم ال channels and we multiplex the channels. But all the channels are multiplexed on the same connection. We have one long-term connection. Okay, if you try to use SSH to download 100 files, what do we do? 100 files, we generate each connection for 100 files? No. Okay, we generate 100 messages for downloading or uploading any files. ماشي كده؟ Again, this is part of the key exchange for, and again similar to TLS, very similar, بس يعني اسماء الكيز مختلفة. This is the these are the keys, and again هنا we don't have the concept of session, SSH session per se. Here it's just one connection, and we have set of keys for this connection, and that's it. We don't have to use separate connections, separate keys for each channel. We don't do that. Yeah, اتكلمنا هنا برضه عن الديفرنس, some difference, small difference between البورت فورورد. قلنا one of the very distinct functionality for SSH اللي هو port forwarding. ماشي؟ وقلنا في حاجه اسمها local port forwarding وريموت port forwarding. Local port forwarding is used for what? To redirect. لما مثلا اكون عايز when I want to مثلا ايه access a restricted website مثلا في in the US. Okay? If I try to access it directly, I say مثلا restrictedsite.com, it's going to be blocked by the firewall of مثلا أريد. ماشي؟ Okay? So how to overcome this is by using local port forwarding. Local port forwarding, it tells the SSH entity on the other side, if you get a traffic coming from this local IP address and this port, please redirect it to this restricted website. So in that case, from the SSH client to the SSH server going through Ooredoo network, this is encrypted. خلاص, nobody sees what's inside. Okay, but when it goes to the SSH server at the other side, the SSH server will redirect, because here we are not putting anything about this restricted website. All we say is that when the SSH server on the other side gets a traffic from this local IP address or this local port, اللي هو 127.0.0.1 from port 80, please redirect it to this website اللي هو restricted. But this, it gets encrypted, فخلاص the remote forwarding is on the other way around. And انت مثلا you have a private network, and this private network uses NAT, but there is a local machine it has a private IP address. It's not exposed to the internet, but you want this local machine to work as a server, معناها to accept traffic. Okay, so in that case, the SSH client will say, if the other side sends me a traffic with a remote port 8080, I'm going to forward it to the local machine on my private IP address, which has a local host and a port in. So this local host also is not exposed to the internet. Okay, but using the remote port forwarding, you can make the local host work as a server. Okay, so this is the difference between local forwarding and remote forwarding. And this is the distinct functionality for SSH. Even TLS does not do that. ماشي كده؟ طيب. Intrusion detection is خلاص بقى احنا we finished network level security, we finished transport security. Here we're talking about intrusion detection. Intrusion detection does not focus on a single layer, as we said. Intrusion detection talks about how to detect intrusions to any part of the network. So it's not specific to one particular layer. Intruders, these are the types of intruders. This is very important. So we know the difference between masquerader, misfeasor, and clandestine. Well, the masquerader is an outsider, okay, who wants to attack or he wants to intrude on an organization. Usually, if you are an outsider, معناها you do not have credentials of a legitimate user. You do not have anything private to the organization. So for you, it's harder, but you can still try to intrude and compromise مثلا or steal مثلا user ID and password of a legitimate user and use it and so on. So usually masquerader is, because he's an outsider, okay, detecting a masquerader, intrusion from masquerader is easier, as we said. That's why we need to classify these. Misfeasor بقى, he is a legitimate internal user, but user level. And he has credentials to access different parts of a private network or a private organization. ماشي؟ معناها ان انت مثلا واحد, you have legitimate access to the servers of an organization, you have legitimate credentials and everything, yet انت for some reason or another, one reason is مثلا a user was really mad, he got really bad mark in the final, ولا مثلا an employee who got fired or something like this, and you have some motivations to really attack the entire organization and perform certain damage. So usually detecting misfeasor is harder. It's possible, but it's harder compared to a masquerader. لأن المسفيزر ده is an internal person with legitimate access to different parts of the organization. What is the difference between misfeasor and clandestine? Clandestine user is an internal user who has admin access. This is the hardest. How can you detect intrusion from a clandestine? It's very hard. This user has access to everything. Even the password files, everything. In that case, we talked about these hackers, okay, criminal hackers, insider, okay, intrusion techniques. When it comes to securing the passwords, we talked about there are two ways. The password files, we store it as plain text, but we try to make the access to this password file very hard. Or, and this is the more common way, is to use a one-way hashing. We don't store the passwords, we store the hash of the passwords. And at the end of this chapter, we talked about salt, which is used to make this hashing even harder for anyone to access. We talked about this. طيب, احنا قلنا ان for intrusion we have two branches, and I think so here in this video we talked about the branches of intrusion detection techniques. We talked about rule-based. For rule-based, we have them in two phases. We have offline phases where we do the analysis, and then we have the online phases. We take some audit records and we analyze them, and then at runtime we take about one audit record at a time. Based on the analysis that we have done, then we can use some anomaly detection techniques to try to flag or to classify whether this audit record will lead to some intrusion, wala it's benign and it's normal traffic, so we don't have to do anything. طبعا the difference between anomaly detection and the penetration is that this penetration is very much related to the operating system. So we don't take audit records, we take scripts. حاجات بقى مثلا bash scripts مثلا on Unix and so on. So program codes. So this is the difference between these two types. For statistical anomaly detection, we have two types. Lower threshold. By threshold here we mean that we try to monitor the same action repeated multiple times. Okay, so if it fails 3 times, we have to have a threshold. After 3 trials of entering the password wrong, then we flag this as an intrusion, which is very primitive usually. We used to use this in the past, but we're not using it anymore. Or profile-based. By profile-based, I don't actually monitor a certain action multiple times. That I monitor all the actions done by one specific user. All the actions, all types of actions. Okay, and then I analyze them and then alert in case of a problem. ماشي كده؟ So the flow charts you need to understand. طيب, so we cover this. Okay, this is the difference. طبعا احنا اتكلمنا على ال distributed intrusion detection techniques. And the main difference is that we have security agents that are distributed in different parts, and they send to a central manager. Yani we could not get around the fact that we need to have a centralized entity at the end. This centralized entity collects all the information from the agent, and then it decides whether this leads to intrusion or not. ماشي? Yeah, I'm not going to talk about the details of this, مش مشكلة. We talk about honeypots. Honeypots are very easy. It's just a container that lures the attacker to try to get into it and try to use it to monitor exactly what the attacker is trying to do. Yeah, so this is salt. This is very important. So salt, as we said, usually dictionary attacks are done by what? And I don't. Of course, the passwords are stored in the file system as hash. Okay, and hash is one way. I cannot reverse it. But what I can do as an attacker, what I could do is there are many اللي هم بيسموهم easy passwords وكده موجودين حتى على الانترنت. I can have millions of them, right? And I know the hashing technique. The hashing technique is public, صح? So what I could do is that get all these 1 million passwords, okay, and then hash all of them. I can do that very fast, okay, and then compare. If it happens that I see any of the hashes stored in the file system that looks like all the hashes that I generated, then I know the password. صح? This is very easy. Okay, so many people could do that. So in order to prevent these dictionary attacks, what we do is that we do two things actually. We do two things. One is, together with the password, we include what we call salt. A salt is arbitrary number, similar to initial vector, okay, that we combine it with the password before we do the hashing. And the reason for this, the salt gets stored in the file system. هتقول لي طب ما ده what does this add? لا, it adds. ليه بقى؟ Now, all the million passwords that you hashed, now you have to try all the million passwords with all the combinations of the salt. So instead of 1 million, now you have to do it with 100 million. It becomes, the complexity becomes n squared. Okay, so it makes it hard already. So in addition to that, I will also make it even harder by incorporating here, as you say here, as we can see here, slow hash. Because hashing as a mechanism, we said one of the requirements of hashing is to be fast. صح? But for hashing passwords, I will use a specific type of hashes that are very slow. So instead of using 100 million very fast hashes, I'm going to make it very hard for you. So every single type of hashing you do, it's very slow. So instead of taking مثلا 2 seconds, I'm going to make it take مثلا let's say مثلا 10 seconds. اضرب بقى 10 seconds for 100 million, it becomes really huge. So these are two things. The benefit of the salt now is very clear here. So of course, the salt makes it very difficult for اللي هي بنسميها dictionary attacks اللي أنا قلت عليها. Okay, but also it makes the duplication of the passwords between multiple systems real possible, because we said that if you use the same password for multiple systems, okay, معناها once I know your password, I can attack all these systems. Okay, but now with the salt, I can allow you to have the same passwords on all the systems, but use different salt on each one. Okay, so that's really good. So this is the benefit of the salt. And it becomes really impossible to find out whether a person uses the same password. انت من نفسك مش هتعرف because the hashes are different on each system. So you don't know that I have actually used the same password on each system. So this is the real benefit of the system. So these are examples of how you do this slow hashing. These are some standards, okay? And the requirements of all these standards is to make it slow, on purpose to make it slow. This part is the only part in the material which has some calculations. Okay, that's why it's very important. We need to have some calculations. We need to be able to, and it's very easy. So security risk evaluation is all about being able to quantify risk. So you have a node, and this node we need to calculate quantitatively what is the risk, okay, of this node being attacked. How do we do this quantitatively? So that's what this part explains, and it's very easy. What we did is that we defined what risk is. Risk is basically the multiplication of the impact, the impact of this node multiplied by the probability of being attacked. And this probability depends on what? Depends on some detected vulnerabilities in this node. يعني مثلا a node runs Windows. Okay? Windows as a product, it has set of vulnerabilities and known vulnerabilities. هتقول لي ازاي اصلا عندهم list of known vulnerabilities وهم ما عالجوهاش. Yes, there are certain vulnerabilities that are على فكرة in some cases حتى available in public databases, but they will have some time to close all these vulnerabilities. And by the time they close, other ones will open. Okay? So one node, based on the products and the software that is being used inside this node, will have set of vulnerabilities. Okay? So from these vulnerabilities, what we do is that we calculate the probability of this node being attacked. Right? So from this, مثلا a node has 3 vulnerabilities. Okay? So what is the probability of attack given these vulnerabilities? Okay? So from the first vulnerability, I calculate the probability of attacking this particular vulnerability and this particular. What is the probability of attacking any of them? I do all the combinations. I fill probability and statistics. Okay, but here we have shown you some very simple way of calculating this, which we will see. But in any case, الريسك هي عباره عن multiplying it. What is the impact? The impact هو ايه بقى؟ If this node is attacked, this node مثلا has the database of all the accounts on the bank. خلاص, the impact is unlimited. Impact is huge. While this node مثلا contains information that's not very important. So this impact, okay, identifies the importance of the information on this server. ماشي؟ ماشي كده؟ متابعين؟ This is the description. طيب احنا قلنا بقى in order to identify what are the possible threats, okay, we talked about the STRIDE model. STRIDE model, this is implemented by MIT, and it's standard. You need to understand this STRIDE model. What is the difference? What S means? You need to know what S means. S here refers to spoofing identity. T اللي هو tampering with data. Tampering معناها اللي هو passive attack يعني. ماشي؟ Repudiation. اتكلمنا عن repudiation and so on. Information disclosure, denial of service attack, or elevation of privilege. واحد مثلا going from a user to an admin. So these are threats that for each vulnerability, I say this vulnerability could lead to مثلا S, could lead to T, could lead to كذا. واخد بالك؟ With certain probability. ماشي؟ So this is the STRIDE model. The way we do that is that you will be given this table. This table actually shows that you have virtual machines, virtual machine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Each virtual machine has vulnerability. This is the a name of a known vulnerability. It has some ID. And this known vulnerability would lead to a probability of attack of 0.22. This is the probability of attack. Okay? And this probability of attack, okay, may lead to a threat that has to do with D. Here, D اللي هي denial of service attack. Okay? So from this data, we need to calculate the risk of this node. مثلا node, let's say node V2. A node V2 has two vulnerabilities. Okay? So we need to calculate what is the probability of attack on V2, okay, given these two vulnerabilities. فقلنا ممكن ان احنا اصلا the attacker could utilize the vulnerability اللي هي الاولانيه. In this case, I know the probability 0.22. Or he could use the second vulnerability, and this could be a probability of 1. Okay. So what is the probability of attack on this node? لا مش sum بقى خد بالك. The probability of attack is the probability of attacking based on vulnerability 1, or the probability of attack on vulnerability 2, or the probability of attacking on both. صح؟ لأن أنا I could use one of them, or I can perform the attack. In that case, I will have a probability of 0.22. لا ما احنا هنتكلم على الريليفنت threats دي خليها بعدين نتكلم عليها in the next step. But here أنا now I'm attacker. I'm trying to attack virtual machine 2. Either what do I know? I know information about these two vulnerabilities. So either I can utilize vulnerability 1. In this case, I will have a probability of successful attack of 1. Or if I utilize the second one, then I will have probability 100%. If I utilize, okay, but assume that this is not 1, يعني just to make it يعني برضه arbitrary. Let's say مثلا this is 0.5. I will have a probability of 0.5. Okay. If I try to utilize both of them, okay, then what is the probability of being successful? Both of them معناها multiplication of the probability, صح? Okay. So as we said to you, يعني instead of doing this, all these combinations, just to make it easy, is to calculate the complement, because what is the summation of all these probabilities? You know, it's 1, صح? So the probability of attacking successfully VM2 is in fact 1 minus failing, okay, in utilizing both of them. Failing in utilizing both of them, 1 minus 0.22 and 1 minus 1. يعني هي اللي هي دي 1 minus, okay, the probability of being unsuccessful to utilize all of them. هو 1 minus معناها ايه؟ It calculates all these combinations that we talked about, utilizing the vulnerability 1, utilizing vulnerability 2. افرض عندك مثلا 100 vulnerabilities، هتفضل تقول بقى ايه؟ either use 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 100 or 1 and 2, 2 and 3. تفضل تعمل كل الcombinations دي. Okay? We cannot do this, صح? It becomes very hard. And instead of doing this, we know that the probability, the summation of all probabilities is 1. So this probability is in fact 1 minus the probability of failure. The probability of failure on this vulnerability is 1 minus 0.22. The probability of failure of here is 1 minus 1. Okay? And then 1 minus the kullu, I did agree. The probability. Now, this is the probability of being successful in attack. Is this the risk? No, the risk has two components, huh? The probability and the impact. Impact is here. طبعا هنا we have the impact of the entire node, بس هنا we have the impact of the node if there is a spoofing attack. يعني هنا here in VM2 here we have the impact if مثلا if I have a spoofing attack then the impact will be 0.05. If I have a T attack, the impact will be كذا. Okay? So by multiplying this probability with these impacts, I get the risk if there is a spoofing attack or there is a denial of service attack and so on. يبقى أنا one machine I calculate the probability of attack based على vulnerability كلها. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, whatever. Calculate the probability. Then multiply the probability with these weights, I get the risk, okay, of having spoofing attack, the risk of having T attack, the risk of having denial and so on. لو جمعتهم كلهم على بعض, I get the full risk of this node, the full risk that this node really presents. زي ما قلنا هنا اللي هي ايه؟ here. يبقى the risk on node هي ايه؟ all the risks of all the security threats. اللي احنا السكيورتي threats بالنسبه لنا اللي هي السترايد موديل اللي هم 6 different security threats. ماشي كده؟ A calculated example اهو. So what you will be given is these two tables. Okay? So what you need to do if مثلا VM2 has two vulnerabilities. So first I need to calculate the probability of being successful in attacking VM2 given these two or three vulnerabilities. وقلنا ده سهل جدا اللي هو 1 minus the probability of failure on all of them. ماشي؟ Get the probability ده, then this is the اللي هو ده هنا. طبعا the probability of VM2 is 1. ليه؟ لأن في 1 vulnerability هنا the successful attack is 1. So 1 minus 1 is 0. And we take 1 minus 0 is 1. خلاص, here is 1. Okay? And then this one we multiply it by the weights of VM2 اللي هي هنا. We get these numbers. If we sum all of them, we get the risk on VM2. واضح كده؟ طيب. This risk, by the way, it does not take into consideration that some of these attacks are irrelevant on this node. ليه؟ يعني خد بالك هنا this vulnerability مثلا can only facilitate a denial of service attack. But you cannot use this vulnerability to مثلا perform a spoofing attack. You cannot. And this vulnerability is related particularly to this type of threat. But here, I calculated the risk on all of the threats. Okay? So that's why here, what we did here is that we did a small adjustment or a small correction. We said that for VM2, we have D, we have T, we have I, and we have D. So we have all these 4 threats. What we don't have is E. We don't have E. And we don't have S. Because it's tried, صح? We don't have S, we don't have E. Okay? So that's why here, oops, sorry. So here, you see at S, we make it 0, and at E, we make it 0. هنا كان في رقم. There was a number here. But these threats are irrelevant on VM2. They cannot happen, right? So we assign 0 here, and here the risk becomes slightly different. ماشي? So this is after we consider the relevant threats. So this calculation is after we consider the relevant threats. واضح كده؟ ماشي كده؟ So that's it. So this is the only part where we have some calculations. يعني. Other than this, we don't have any calculations. The last one really, as we said, this chapter ده يعني bonus chapter. Then I did not. This is like a bonus chapter, and here in firewalls, we talked about the different types of firewalls. We said that we have the packet filtering firewalls, and we have the application-specific filters, application-specific firewalls. وقلنا packet filters firewalls يعني similar كده حتى security policy database. We have to apply certain rules on the headers. but we don't care about the content of the data. The content نفسها we don't care about. يعني الابلكيشن نفسه HTTP we don't care. Application نفسه exchange what we don't care. ماشي؟ So we don't know and we don't have to filter packets or traffic based on the application level. So this is what we call packet filtering firewalls. So packet filters work on these fields. So we have IP address, protocol values, whether مثلا at some point we may filter all the traffic uses UDPs. We can do this, but we do not care about the content actually of the data itself. Application level protocols, they do look at the application data itself. So you can say, I allow HTTP, I allow HTTPS, I don't allow HTTP. So a firewall may put the application specific firewall may in fact put some filters على an application level protocol or the data. ماشي؟ I can say مثلا if the data itself contains credit card information, do not send it out. مثلا حاجة زي كده. But packet filtering does not do that. ماشي؟ Yeah, here اتكلمنا على ال Yeah, so this is the different types of the firewall اللي هو بنسميه الباكيت فلتر or application specific. In the packet filter, these are the rules or the fields that we check in the packet, and we can say permit or deny. Permit or deny. This is how the firewall works. These are the weak and the strength. Okay. Yeah, this tiny fragment attacks. So now one of the very interesting attacks. Tiny fragments attacks. We are, as we said, we are allowed to take a big IP packet and break it into fragments. صح? Okay. So one of the possible attacks that I can really use it to bypass the firewall, مثلا, if the firewall uses packet filtering based مثلا على TCP header. Let's say مثلا packet filtering firewall says, okay, so if you try to use website using port 80, مثلا, this will be blocked. But if you use port 443 low secure, then okay, مثلا, okay. So in order to filter the packet based on that, what you need is the TCP header. Okay. What tiny fragment attack does is very interesting, really. You take the IP itself, the IP packet itself, and you break it down, but this time you break it down into very, very small fragments that really even the TCP header is broken between two fragments. Okay. So theoretically you can do that. But this will really confuse the firewall, because the firewall needs to it needs the full TCP header in order to recognize where the port number is, right? But the tiny fragments will confuse the firewall, because the firewall will not find the complete TCP header, because it's a very small fragment. So half the TCP header is in one fragment and the other half is in another fragment. And packet filtering will read the fragment, will see the IP header, but will try to read the TCP header. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist fully. So this is one of the very interesting tiny fragments. اللي هو ايه? The intruder uses the IP fragmentation option to create extremely small. Even the TCP header itself is corrupt, unless you have to wait for all the fragments and collect them all together to be able to read the TCP header. هو بقى الفكره بقى the packet filtering firewall, can you discard the packets in that case or not? So in that case you have to have a specific rule, because if you don't have a specific rule where you discard these tiny fragments, then what you will do is that you say try to read the TCP header, the TCP header cannot be read, so okay, خلاص bypass or pass the packet. Okay, so this is one of the workarounds that intruders usually do. ماشي كده؟ ماشي. Other than this, we talked about the application level, gateway as we said اللي هو بيبص بقى على الابلكيشن ليفل data and application level protocol. Other than this, I think يعني طبعا we talked about all these concepts and we talked about VPN as part. Well, there are some overlaps زي ما قلنا between intrusion detection and firewalls. There's some overlap between the two يعني ماشي. Any questions? Any specific questions any one of you has? I think this is all what I have يعني. Any specific questions?